One of the most incredible aspects of working on a game with Unreal Engine 5 is the ability to use systems and tools that huge game dev studios use. Today I will tackle implementing one of such systems into our game. A system that is a cutting-edge technology in game development and has been worked on by industry veterans on games such as The Last of Us Part 2. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In the last two devlogs, we laid the foundations for the most important gameplay systems in our game, the combat system and the player abilities system in Project Veles. If you missed it, I really recommend checking it out after watching this one. Let's briefly talk about a system that is incredibly important for games of all types. I'm talking about movement and traversal. Those systems in games evolved over time. Back in the early days, movement in games was pretty simple. Characters in Pac-Man or The Legend of Zelda from 1986 moved along grids, snapping from one point to another, playing a simple animation in a loop. It worked for those classic 2D titles, but as games evolved, so did our expectations. Fast forward to 1996 with Super Mario 64, and we've got Mario running, jumping, flipping, and all of it seems quite responsive. It is an evolution of a previous system, but it is still mostly pre-animated. You press a button and the animation plays. It's cool, but we're just getting started. Then there is Prince of Persia. This game was one of the first to use rotoscoping, where animations were traced over real human movements, giving it much smoother and more realistic feel compared to the clunky movements we were used to. Creator of the game, Jordan Mechner, recorded his brother's movement on a high school parking lot and used it to create movement in the game. Still, this was all keyframe animation, one frame after another in sequence. As games moved into open worlds, blending animations became the next big thing. Assassin's Creed is a perfect example. Here we can see animations smoothly blending together, running, jumping, climbing, fighting, all in one seamless experience. You no longer felt like you were triggering individual animations. It was one fluid motion. Fast forward a few years later, we got inverse kinematics. Games like Uncharted used this technique to make Nathan Drake's hands and feet automatically adjust to the environment. Instead of predefined animations, the character dynamically reacts to where he's climbing or standing. But it didn't stop there, obviously. Grand Theft Auto 4 took things further with procedural animations, thanks to the Euphoria engine. This system dynamically generated movements in real time. Characters no longer relied solely on pre-animated actions. They could now stumble, react to punches, and even fall differently each time. Now let's talk about the next milestone in games animation. One that recently became the current big thing in some of the bigger games. In 2016, Christian Zadziuk, who at a time was an animation director at Ubisoft, gave a GDC presentation about motion matching system. At the time, motion matching was already generally known concept, but thanks to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One consoles catching up with their hardware, it finally became possible to use in games. But what is motion matching? To fully understand this concept, let's quickly iterate on how the animation process usually looked like at the time and how it still looks like to a certain degree in bigger games production. To create an animation for the character, you usually start with motion capture, where you record your actors performing specific movements and loops for later character movement. Data captured on motion capture session is then cleaned up, edited and polished by an animator, mainly by hand, which is quite a pain in the ass process. Then, such cleaned and polished animation sequence is used to implement in animation state machines and generally in game systems, which requires another pain in the ass step of setting up rules, blend times, loop points, etc. After that, such animation system is used in the game to see if it works. The main idea of introducing motion matching is to cut up as much of that pain in the ass process of cleaning up and setting up animation by hand as possible, to allow animators to put more artistic work into things that matter most about the visuals of animations. In motion matching approach, you build a big animation database for poses during a motion capture session. Instead of recording specific moves, you record a lot of running around, turning, stopping, various jumping, rolling, all from different directions and angles. The system then understands how specific poses of the body correlate to the poses and moves that the actors made right before that move, taking a lot of details into account. Instead of focusing on the bigger chunk of a character animation cycle, motion matching focuses on a lot of detailed characteristics of movement over a small amount of time, let's say 1 second. Things taken into account here are, for example, the velocity of movement, trajectory of movement in regards to the movement in the past, tags, joint positions, etc. The system then processes this data and finds an appropriate matching section in a big library of poses. Let's take a look at a simple example. Here's a simple run animation that heavily shows weight shifting during a run cycle. Even though it looks quite simple, to create such an animation through the usual process, it would take tons and tons of work to set up properly for a game, where player can freely decide when and how to change direction during movement. It would take a ton of work, mainly because each turn would require a transition animation where such body shift would be played, most likely making the game less responsive during that animation. But the same type of locomotion using motion matching becomes quite simple to implement. All you have to do is build an animation database from motion capture session, during which an actor would perform such movement from various directions and poses. Having all that data, the system would create a big library of poses, and voila! You achieved this animation without tons and tons of pain in the ass process. Knowing how motion matching works and the potential it introduces to the game, it was time to implement it into the project. Now, the best thing about it is Epic released a game animation sample project that is using motion matching with an already existing animation database built from over 500 different animations. I added my own night character and tweaked it to be usable within the motion matching sample project and then re-imported it back into my game. I had to remake quite a lot of things in all of the systems already made that were touching on movement, such as the dodge roll system, stamina system or sword combat, but now I know it was totally worth it. This is how movement looked like before. And after adding motion matching system. Now, having such a system in the game allowed me to start designing some interesting mechanics based on character movement. I want Project Veles to have environmental platforming layer in it, most likely connected to some interesting character abilities. I worked on a simple prototype for first of such platforming element, connected with the ability to control time. The way I see it is, the Land of the Dead is a place where rules of physics can be twisted in various ways. It is also a land in which a soul has abilities based on its perception in the land of the living. Therefore, if people in the living world believe that the main character was able to, let's say, control time, it becomes a reality in the Land of the Dead. As a prototype, I added a simple mechanic of controlling an explosion that would create a temporary bridge for the character. I will play around more with this mechanic, as I want to have more of a puzzle element to it, not a simple press the button and cross the bridge system. And that's it for this devlog. To summarize, so far we spent about 2 months on Project Veles. If you liked our content, please subscribe to this channel. As YouTube statistics tell me, most of you are actually not subscribed. I wonder if we will hit 5,000 subs this year. I mean, it would be really awesome. See you in the next one. Bye!